There's been times where you just think, just really like to get off and sleep in a bed and have a bath, and then I'll come back and finish tomorrow. These are the little fantasies going on in your head. I was amongst the ice going the wrong way round, and I'd never experienced that before. And after 3 days, I was like, I'm just going to get off and hang out with the penguins. It's got to be easier.
Hey, gang, and greetings from Tortola. I am sitting on the dock at Nanny Key Marina as I record this, trying to hide from the wind noise. Both Ice Bear and Eastbjorn made landfall in the BVI this week after about 10 days at sea, and we went nonstop from Annapolis, which was cool. And while it was not completely without drama, the trips went great, and it's awesome to have both boats docked right next to each other in Nanny Key as we get cleaned up and working on a few repairs. In fact, as I talk, the Eastbjorn's roller furler is laying down on the dock in front of me. That's one of them. We got to fix the gooseneck and the lower rudder bearing on Ice Bear. And the reason that Eastbjorn's furler's laying on the dock is because the turnbuckle on the forestay snapped at the lower eye fitting. That was scary. Thankfully, it was on the last day at sea, and they didn't lose the mast. But that should be back together by the end of the day today and back up on the boat. This is cool. It's the start of a new era for us. August Sandberg has officially taken command of Eastbjorn, and he fell in love with the boat during the 1,600-mile passage south. And it really feels nice for me to hand over responsibility of Eastbjorn to him and know that she and her crew are in exceptionally good hands.
Yeah, that's right. It was middle of the night, and this just enormous bang just rocked the whole boat. And long story short, the eye that connects the turnbuckle from the headstay to the stem head had just snapped clean off.
I think Ben Doer said it was like someone took a samurai sword to it.
That's what it looks like. But yeah, amazingly, we saved everything. The rig didn't come down. We had the inner forestay rigged already. We had halyards ready that we put down to the stem head, and motor sailed our way into the BVIs, safe and sound.
And here we are 2 days later, and it's about to be put back together. So that's a pretty quick fix.
That is true. Touch wood, though. We're gonna, we got some new shining rigging parts here. Then we're gonna connect everything and hopefully get it hoisted back up this afternoon, which would be super exciting.
Besides that, how was it on your first big passage on Eastbjorn?
It was great. It was really great. She is an amazing boat, and we had the best people, the best conditions, and just a blast, really.
August had a few repeat crew on board with him, namely Mark and Martha, that made the voyage easier on him, and we've heard nothing but wonderful things about his ability as skipper, obviously, as I expected. And it's awesome to have all of our friends around. We've got ship's photographer James Ostroms joined us on Ice Bear. James, say hi to the podcast.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Podcast.
As did Lee Cumberland, who we call ship's engineer and also the podcast producer.
Hello, this is Lee.
So much energy. And even my dad, Dennis, was with us. Dad, say hi to the podcast.
Hello, Mr. Podcast.
Unoriginal. And Ben Doer of Sail Bainbridge was the mate on Eastbjorn. And
hi to the podcast, Ben. Yeah, hi, podcast.
Nice do-over. Ben Sufer, our PR and podcast guy, was part of the crew. And yes, believe it or not, we actually did have crew with us, even though we had a lot of 59 North people here. But it makes it so much easier to work on the boat when you're surrounded by so many fun and capable people. And we've just gotten more work done in the last 2 days than we normally would have gotten done in a week or two at home with just Mia and I. So we still have a few spots to sail with us in the Caribbean on both Eastbjorn and Ice Bear in 2020. Where did I lose my place here? On both boats in 2020. You can check the homepage at 59-north.com for updated availability in February when both boats will be going down island to Grenada. The Ice Bear trip is unique, and that'll be a combination of offshore and island hopping, so a bit of island exploration and overnight sailing through some of our favorite islands. So check that out if you need a break from the northern winter. And hey, guess what? We're doing a Celestial workshop in Annapolis soon. The 2-day weekend will be February 1st and 2nd and hosted at the Eastport Yacht Club in Annapolis. I think we're also doing a free, open-to-the-public panel discussion on Celestial the night before. That'd be Friday, January 31st. But look on 59-north.com/celestial for confirmation on that. It's been a while since we hosted a workshop in Annapolis, so don't miss out on this one. All right, it's back to boat work for me this afternoon, and Lee, we both just took a lunch break, and now it's time to get back at it. I have been super stoked to release this episode with Dee Caffari, and I cannot wait to hear what you think about it. Mia and I recorded this one in England back in September when we were driving around the UK on our little podcast recording tour, and Dee met us at a hotel in Southampton where her sailing career actually began. This one was, without a doubt, my favorite interview that I've ever done. Don't know if it was the best one, but it was the most fun person that I've ever talked to. She's the most warm, humble, and inspiring sailor that I've ever spoken with. Really person, sailor or not sailor. And right from the start, Dee made me feel comfortable and at home, and we really connected on a lot of different ideas. She's one of the most accomplished sailors I've ever talked to as well, so it was humbling just being in the room with her. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. And until next time, hold fast. On the Wind is presented by Weems & Plath, makers of fine nautical and weather instruments since 1928. And recently they introduced the OGM nav lights. They're these LED nav lights. I've actually had one on Eastbjorn as its masthead light since long before Weems & Plath took over production. But anyway, recently they took over production of the OGM nav lights. They are super small, super energy efficient LEDs, and interestingly enough, people tend to think that LEDs are cool. They actually do produce heat, and most LED fixtures don't do anything to dissipate that heat, and therefore the lights don't last as long because if you overheat it, they're going to shorten the life. So Weems & Plath has sort of ingeniously invented these housings that use different materials and have different heat sinks in there to get the heat away from the light bulb instead of keeping it in there, and therefore increasing the length of the light in terms of the years that it's usable. So for example, Eastbjorn's masthead light is a combination anchor light and tricolor, and when you turn both switches on at the same time, it turns into a strobe light, which is useful when you have a safety issue if you're trying to get someone's attention offshore. And also, it's got a light diode in it for the anchor light. So if you're anchored for a few days, you can leave the switch on, and it automatically turns itself off when the sun comes up. So check out the OGM range of nav lights on weems-plath.com. On the Wind is also supported by Offshore Passage Opportunities, which is pretty much what the name implies, and have also been a long-term sponsor of the show. And by Barnacle Systems, Inc., another returning sponsor on the show, who make remote monitoring and security systems for boats. Stay tuned after today's episode to hear more about our relationship with OPO and about how we use Barnacle's units on both Eastbjorn and now Ice Bear for peace of mind when we're off the boat. You're listening to On the Wind, my podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Andy Schell. Dee Caffari is perhaps the most accomplished sailor I've ever had on the podcast, and she's easily the most inspiring. Dee has sailed around the world a full 6 times, 3 of them solo and nonstop, and most recently as skipper of Turn the Tide on Plastic in the last Volvo Ocean Race campaign. There isn't much she hasn't done in racing, whether solo or crewed, as skipper or in another role, but I took away much deeper insights from our conversation on things like leadership, psychology, and inspiration. Mia and I met Dee in England to hear her story. Okay, cool. Dee, this is as cool as my setting was this morning with Pip on her boat. This is probably the weirdest setting that I've ever had to record an interview. So do you want to get us started and just describe this strange setting?
Well, this is very strange because we're in a dark room. We're actually in an inside cinema inside the Harbour Hotel in Ocean Village Marina, Southampton. But the aim of bringing you to Southampton and Ocean Village in particular was it was where I first started my sailing career. This was my first job running in and out of this marina when I worked for Mike Golding.
Okay.
So there is a history there and it is poignant, but yeah, this is a strange room.
So that was your first sailing job?
Yeah, so I was a school teacher for 5 years and did a big career change, and I went over to the Isle of Wight to UKSA and retrained. Thought water sports was the way forwards, and then realised that I was a little bit older than everyone else running along the beach and surfing and windsurfing, but had a good time. But saw that yachting had potential. It was a whole new world. I got my qualifications there and looked into the job market, and then, you know, suddenly a whole new world opened up to me, and I haven't really looked back since then.
Is that like, I mean, is it a career path nowadays? to go into yachting, or is it still sort of you really have to be focused and want it?
No, I think there's a lot of people choosing it from a young age as a career, and a lot of people changing careers to it. And I think the reason being is they're realizing the opportunities that are out there. You don't have to be a professional racer. You don't have to, be a water sports instructor. But if you want to work, there's a lot of jobs out there in the super yacht world at various levels, and you can keep adding to your qualifications and experience as time goes on and work your way up the ranks. So, you may start as a chamois technician or serving food, but, eventually you could be skippering or captaining a super yacht for a private owner, and you're off on a nice tax-free income.
Did you know that was a career path when you obviously started as a school teacher? So what changed?
I had absolutely no idea half the marine jobs were out there when I first started. I literally was really happy teaching, and I went on a holiday. I had a really difficult couple of years. My father passed away, and I was very much led by what I saw. If I saw other people doing some good stuff, I'd be like, oh, I want to do that. I want to try that. And I had all sorts of ideas, jet pilots, firefighters, you name it, I thought I could do it. And I had this vision of I'd ski in the winter and sail in the summer. And my dad was like, oh, yeah, this is all really good conversation, but, very soon you're going to be too old to do any of it. So are you going to talk about it, or are you actually going to do it? And I think that must have resonated. And then the following year, another quite strong influence in my life, where I worked at the International College, he passed away. And he was very much for, life's what you make it. You have to make these things happen. You have to drive things. And I just thought, this is too much of a sign for me to ignore. And I went on a holiday, and I went on a diving and sailing holiday. So you lived on board the boat, sailed around East Africa, Pembrokeshire Island and Mozambique and that kind of area. And we'd sail and we'd dive, different dives. And the dive master had just come from UKSA and was talking to me about the training and the opportunities that were out there. And I just thought, wow, that's got to be worth looking into. And I looked into it and followed it up, and the rest is history.
And did you grow up in a sailing family?
My mother, scared stiff of water, she wouldn't even have a shower because the water went over her head. She would bath in the smallest amount of water possible. She said, oh, would you like a bath? I'll run the bath water for you. Thinking, no thanks, that's just a puddle. So definitely didn't get it from my mother's side. My father always had dreams of, sailing off into the sunset, and my mother would send brown paper envelopes stuffed with cash to keep him in the lifestyle he'd become accustomed to. That never happened. But, there was no harm in dreaming. So I guess there was an element of fantasy that I must have picked up from my father. And we did have a motorboat growing up as a family, where we kind of used as a caravan, the weekend caravan, the summer holiday caravan. And I guess I learned a lot of my seamanship from him in that respect, and my navigation and my awareness. But as far as sailing went, I never actually sailed until I went to university.
That was the first time you were on a sailboat?
Yeah.
Really?
So I'm not your average person that obviously grew up in dinghies and had sailed all their life.
Is there an average person? I mean,
well, I think we stereotype people, and we just assume that somebody to be successful must have been doing it all their life. And it's quite a shock when people realize, oh, it's a career change, and actually you've really invested yourself in this quite heavily.
Well, I think, just as an aside, that's something that is... When you get to you're at the highest level of the sport, and I think people don't really recognize the amount of work. You weren't given anything, and not just the racing stuff, but to live a lifestyle like this, to have a lifestyle where from the outside it doesn't really appear as you're working necessarily, but it's 10 times more work than any job kind of is.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to forget the hours and the hard work you put in. People just look at you and you're always traveling. You generally have a healthy glow about you. I keep reminding them that it's rust and not, suntan a lot of the time. And they just think, wow, that's amazing. But actually, you made the commitment. I made the commitment to change careers. I started at the bottom of the ladder yet again, and I scrubbed the decks and served the food and cleaned the toilets. And I did the corporate days where... day in, day out, you're taking new people onto a boat. You're saying exactly the same things every single day. No, the other way around the winch, and do this. Right, when I say stop, stop. And no, the flappy sail's not a happy sail. I've done all that for several years. And then you start taking that same group, but racing. So it's a little bit more urgency, and you have to be much clearer with your communication. And then eventually I kind of stepped onto where I was leading, and it was racing and it was more professional. And then obviously I've gone all the way up. But it's easy to forget the years of going out in the rain, convincing everyone they're having a really good time for a corporate day and keeping them safe while giving them the exhilaration and the feeling of what it's like to go sailing.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I did the exact same thing. I used to work on a schooner on the Chesapeake Bay, and it was the same thing. It was 2-hour day sails with tourists, and then we did we had 2 identical boats. We did a match racing program, and I mean, exactly what you're saying. And it is... Those days were, I mean, really fun. I have very fond memories of those days as well, though I imagine you probably do too.
Oh, definitely. And there's, you get to know the people that are in the same marina doing the same thing. So you're kind of in this big social group, but it's early mornings. Safety's paramount all day long, even though you're trying to convince everyone that what you're doing is amazing and isn't it good fun and aren't they having a great time? And the heavens open and they're soaked to the skin and it's freezing cold, but you're still telling them, here, have a cup of tea and it's lovely. And then at the end of the day, you got to clear it all up and put it away and do it again the next day.
Do it again the next day and the next day and the next day. I have a couple questions kind of centered around, I don't want to cover too much of your career because it's easy to read about what you've done and I want to talk about a few things, but I'm more interested in like motivations and some of your philosophy and stuff. And my first question is, when you changed careers, did you have a goal? Was where you're at today, was that a conscious goal of yours at the beginning?
It's a real surprise because actually at the time of changing careers, I didn't know it was possible to do what I went on and did. So I didn't know that was where I was going to go. And I didn't know that was an achievable goal to even have in mind. Going around the world was something that I saw Tracy Edwards do on Maiden and Peter Blake do. And they were in Southampton and they left on the Whitbread round the world race. And I was like, wow, those people are amazing. I didn't ever imagine I would be one of those people. So it's kind of strange to look back and realise how far you've come. When I changed careers, it was about choosing a lifestyle, choosing something that got me excited. I loved what I did, but there was still more. I wanted to travel, I wanted to have adventures, and I thought working in the marine industry would enable that to happen. And yes, it does, but I obviously kind of dovetailed what direction I went in as opportunities arose. And I think for most of that, for me, it was about people saying, well, why shouldn't it be you? Or people saying it could be you and me saying to myself, well, why shouldn't it be me? Mm-hmm. And, you have lots of self-doubts along the way and you have these roller coasters, but actually, ultimately, you're the only one that can make it happen. So I must have had something inside me that was strong enough to make it happen.
Was it hard leaving your old career?
No, that sounds awful, but I did really enjoy it. But no, because I was about to embark on something much bigger than I even knew it was going to be. What I miss, I've actually managed to incorporate into my career again now. So if you think about being a teacher is about enabling, empowering and developing young people and opportunities. Well, Turn the Tide on Plastic, my last round the world, was exactly that. 80% of the crew under 30 having never been around the world before. And now, I regularly stay in touch with quite a few of them and just give snippets of advice, give suggestions and encourage what they're all doing. And they're all going on to some really great things. So I kind of feel that I've incorporated that again into my sailing career. So it is a bit of a buzz.
I asked that because it's like, I've always wanted to get into sailing, and I knew that from a very young age, and I was lucky in that sense that it was never like, what do you want to do as a kid? I wanted to do what I'm doing now. But you actually changed careers, and I think there's people fear that, maybe not fear, but there's a momentum that you gain when you've done something for a while and you get comfortable doing that. And in some sense, I think it's harder to make that change than it is to start from scratch in a way.
I think that's a little bit of working in your comfort zone. And for some people, that almost is the hindrance because it's comfortable. And so they relax a little and they're not pushing themselves forwards anymore. And it's quite hard to keep that drive going because why not do what's comfortable and within your kind of comfort zone and you don't stress or you don't push too far. But I guess I'm somebody that needs that strive or that challenge to face and to see what I can go out and achieve. And so I kind of feel that each campaign ends up building on something or putting me just beyond where I think I can be and challenging me to see if I can deliver it.
What was your first opportunity to get into racing and why did you go that way after doing like UKSA sail training stuff? What was it about racing that intrigued you?
I think it's the ultimate, can you make it all come together? So our corporate days, as you say, you teach them how to sail in the morning, serve lunch, and then with the other boats that are around, you pick a course and you have a little afternoon race. And I was naturally competitive. I think I've always been a sports person. So my degree is sports science. And I guess that's a natural inbred thing. You generally are in a competition and you want to win. That's the reason.
Did you play sports as a kid?
Yeah. I was definitely, the girl that went to ballet and tap and did dance school. But then I played more and more sport and the sport took over. I played very competitive, high level volleyball. I was in the athletics team, I was in the netball team, I was in the hockey team, and I loved it. So I guess there's always been that competitive element. My dad was also quite somebody that would push. I'd say I got 98% in a test, and he's like, what happened to the other 2%? So I guess that's just my mentality or the way I was brought up to always want that extra bit. And I think I went from the corporate sailing I did a transatlantic, and then I ended up in a company that did a lot of Caribbean racing. So we did the Caribbean season. So we'd do the racing in the UK, go over to the Caribbean, do the Caribbean regattas. Same thing again, though, amateur crew. You teach them how to sail for a couple of days and then you put them around the race course. And actually, I really enjoyed that. And then the opportunity was to skipper the Global Challenge. So that was like the ultimate corporate sailing. That was an amateur crew going all the way around the world. And you realise then that what starts as a sailing challenge ends up being a man management challenge and a conflict management challenge. So, you have all these elements and you learn skills that you didn't even know you had.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Like you've done a bunch of solo sailing and you've done a bunch of crewed sailing, both as a skipper and as a crew member. So like, what did you learn from those different experiences that you've applied now going forward to stuff? Yeah,
I think the solo stuff was very much... I guess part of it may have been driven from being a skipper on the Global Challenge. I decided it was easier without the 17 paying people on board. But it was also understanding me. So my biggest progression in my solo sailing was actually having the understanding of myself, how I operate, how I react to things, how I can keep my performance. So I went from the wrong way around the world, where I was this huge emotional roller coaster and very out of control of my emotions, wasting a lot of energy.
So I'm looking at Mia because I'm very much like that.
Yeah, so you waste a lot of energy with these utter highs that you're loving, and then you're in tears the next bit because you're so frustrated, and it's exhausting.
Yeah,
and you still haven't helped yourself actually move forwards any faster. And I was convinced eventually to see a sports psychologist. Now, I was very British about this. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was just like, I'll just have a cup of tea. And actually,
I'm really interested. I'm listening carefully now. I'm at this stage in my
this was
career.
The biggest progression I made. And when I then went to the Vendée Globe, so I stepped from being an adventurer to a professional sailor. That was the biggest transition I made. The sailing, you're physically always going to adapt, and you'll learn how to sail the boat better and better the more time you spend on it. But to understand mentally how to manage yourself is the massive difference. I can go around the world now knowing I won't cry because I understand what triggers different things. I know when my best sleep is. I know when I need to eat or drink as a result of the frustrations. You can't make a decision looking at the weather chart. But actually, if you have half an hour's sleep, you have a really nice, good meal. An hour later, you make the decision with a snap of your fingers and it's really obvious. And you're thinking, why couldn't I do that 2 hours ago?
Yeah.
And then how do you keep motivating yourself to go forward? It's really rough, it's dangerous, you're exhausted. Are you really going to do that sail change? Well, yeah, because the others on the other boats are doing it. You're not going to let yourself down just because you haven't got the energy. It's that whole mental conversation of how to manage yourself.
What did the sports psychologist? Can you summarize some of the techniques? Like it's not an easy transition.
No, especially when I didn't want to go, and he knew I didn't want to be there. And I think
was it your idea to go, or did somebody else encourage you to go?
No, I was being supported by my former university.
Okay.
So they said, we'll support you. They did the physical training, the nutrition. You need to see a sports psychologist. And I was like very reticent, very reluctant. And eventually I was like, all right. And you just know this guy has absolutely 100% knows that you just don't want to be there. And I don't know how he did it, but he asked one question and about 30 minutes later I stopped speaking. And I was like, how did you do that? And he said, do you want to know what you've told me? And literally he told me all these things and I was like, no way. I was like, how did you do that? And the interesting thing that he recognized almost straight away was how my natural language was very negative. I told him what I didn't want to do. I don't want to let people down. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to come last. He said, you keep telling me what you don't want to happen. He said, but you haven't told me anything that you do want to happen. And I really struggled to have positive language. And then over a number of sessions, you realize that actually other people's language to you has a big impact as well. So you're sailing on your own and you get emails from your team and them telling me, oh yeah, but Andy's going 2 knots faster than you, isn't going to help because I can't control your boat speed. Mm-hmm. What they need to say is, are you happy with your sail plan? Are you on your numbers? And you go, oh, no, actually, and the forecast is all right. I should probably put a bigger sail up. And just changing it to positive language has a lot bigger impact on what you're doing. And it was amazing. And I've actually I'm very aware of that. And I made a conscious effort to change my language to positive language. I'm very goal focused. So I need my little list and I tick off so I feel a sense of achievement. And, I put that in my everyday living now as well.
What were some of the things before you did that? What were some of your triggers, both for the highs and the lows?
Generally, if I hadn't eaten properly and I hadn't slept properly, I couldn't make a decision or something went wrong or I'd get a position report and then, it's just that downward spiral. I'd cry really easily. It'd be really frustrating. And it's more frustration than anything. And then, the good bits, it just takes the boats kind of set up right and you've got your boat speed and it's going well and it's really nice and you just get that, but I'm not sharing it with anyone. And I just was very lost in what my focus was. And I would worry about the things I could do nothing about. So I'd spend countless times looking at the numbers, wind speed. 40 knots, 42 knots, 44 knots. And you can't control that. The boat's fine. You're not actually physically doing anything to change it. So it's actually accept the things that you can't consciously change and just focus on the things you can do something about.
Cliched, but it works.
Completely. Yeah. But at the times of stress, when you're fatigued, when you're emotional, when you're under this level of stress, you don't think rationally, you don't think of obvious things, and you need to have that reminder. Can I do anything about that wind speed? No. So what have I done to deal with that? Well, I've got the right sails up. I've stowed everything I need to stow. So now I just need to, let's have something to eat, or let's have a drink, or now's the time for sleep. And it's just focusing on the things you can do something about.
Do you still see a sports psychologist?
No, but I think the problem I would have liked to have had, like a mentor, I think is probably the right word for Turn the Tide on Plastic. Somebody to help me with that responsibility of leadership of generally vulnerable young sailors that, it's quite important to get the right atmosphere and environment for them to grow in. And when you're having to do everything, lead the debriefs, give the good stuff and the bad stuff out and manage the team and go sailing. I kept sitting at the table changing my hat lots of times. And it would have been quite nice to have had an external person support that. So they were a bit more objective and I was part of the team as much as the crew were.
You were there listening as well, yeah.
Because I needed to benefit from it as well. But our finances didn't have that. So, I think that's a form of psychology that I think would have helped everybody, that I think is a valued investment for a team. And is often underestimated.
Do you like being a leader?
I doubted myself several times in the last projects. It was quite an undertaking.
Recently?
Yeah.
In what sense?
In the Turn the Tide on Plastic project, which was the last round the world, finished last year, I didn't know if I was the right person for the job, if I had big enough shoulders to take it on.
Was it your idea?
It was a culmination, but I got a few extra challenges thrown at me. Somebody says, would you like to lead this team in the Volvo Ocean Race? Realistically, I was never going to say no. And then it was like, 50-50 split as a female skipper, you should endorse that. And I was like, well, yeah, I totally agree with that. Oh, and we also want them to be under 30, so they won't have any experience of doing it. I was like, okay. And have the United Nations on board. Oh, okay. And here's your budget. And it was like, okay, these are quite a few challenges to juggle. And I doubted that I was the right person for the job a couple of times. And you doubt yourself when you have to enter that room for the skippers meeting and the other 6 skippers are there. And you walk in, and I had that imposter syndrome of, well, I'm not going to be listened to. What am I going to add to this table discussion? But actually, I had to have a word with myself of, well, none of them have gone around the world on their own. none of them would take on the challenge that I have. So yeah, I do have a right to sit here, but I had to have that internal conversation to make myself go through that door. Every stopover, every skippers meeting, I felt dreadful and had to have this little inner dialogue going on. And the guys probably had no idea how they made me feel slightly inferior as an imposter, or almost kind of wrote me off a little bit. They probably had no idea they did that, but that's the kind of atmosphere I'd decided they were creating for me, and I had to deal with it.
So what sort of self-talk did you use to snap out of that?
Well, a little bit of reminding myself what I have achieved.
Yeah.
And actually, the reason I had the project was because no one else could do it. As a teacher, I'm all about empowering opportunities for young people. Perfect for my team. As a female in this male-dominated environment, it was a complete objective to have a boat that was half full of girls, showing that they can have the opportunity too. And then, United Nations is great. It's like a breath of fresh air just to have different personalities and ways of thinking about things. And then having the sustainability message is a subject close to my heart. So I actually brought lots of strands of my life together in one project, which is probably why I'm so proud of what we did.
Yeah, we both, Mia and I, followed that whole race, and specifically your project. And I was reading on your website this morning about how you got so frustrated with the Southampton Boat Show last year, and we share the same frustrations. You go to an ostensibly sailing event that is ostensibly cares about the ocean, and everything's in disposable cups, and it's so frustrating. And so, how did you manage that? Because you actually did seem to make a difference from this year to last year.
And it's hard, but I came back so buoyed by what we'd achieved in the year of the ocean race. And also the ocean race really took on the stopovers. They really hit that hard with the whole sustainability theme and the way they acted with everything from the refuse collection to the refuse bins to what they allowed to be sold on site. And so we were in this environment that when I stepped out of that and went to someone else's environment, I was shocked at how bad it could be. And I was like, whoa, what decade are you guys in? You can't live like this. And I think also I realized that I had a platform. I had a platform for which I had quite a strong voice. Having seen it, been there, seen it, done it, lived it, breathed it, talked about it, I realized that I still had to follow up on this. So if anybody was going to help British Marine make a change at the boat show, it was going to be me. So hence, I was very confident to give my strongly worded email, but it has implemented change, and they haven't got it 100% right. But what they did want to do was show me this year what they had done. And then I commented and we discussed ways that it can grow for next year. And hopefully it's, the start of a change of journey and a change of being. And I think all of us almost have a responsibility to any event that we go to now to encourage that kind of thought process so that people are more open to change.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a shame that as an organizer, they don't have better options, but you don't have to, as a consumer, you don't have to accept those options either. So there is a responsibility on both sides.
And I think there's value in reminding people that consumers are powerful. You can just refuse to buy something or purchase something or, acknowledge something. And that is so powerful. It's often overlooked. Everyone says, well, what can I do? Well, there's 7 billion people on the planet, so everyone can do something, and collectively we'll make a massive impact.
You must be following Greta. How do you have any comments on what she's doing?
Well, I mean, there's a case in point. If a 16-year-old can hold, have a speech that is so emboldened and so impactful to so many people on a global scale, and then obviously the same day, that evening, we looked at our own parliament in the UK screaming at each other across the benches. It was embarrassing. And you're just like, there's a difference. And everybody just has to believe a little bit of what Greta's got, and, we can all achieve so much. I mean, she's just galvanized a whole school age group of understanding it. And that's the powerful generation. That's the ones that are going to make all the difference.
Have you met her?
I haven't met her, but I was been talking to Boris and the team, so I was delighted that he took her on, and that was a great thing to do.
Do you know the guys that she sailed with?
Yeah, I do.
So what's their story, and how did that all come together? Do you know?
So Boris, from the ocean race and the microplastic data, the scientific stuff that we did, he spoke to the same organisation, GeoMar in Germany. And he's been carrying a machine, not that does the microplastics, but does all the other analysis that we did. So every time he's been sailing, he's been gathering data, which is valuable to the scientists because just the amount of miles that we all do.
Yeah.
So he's always had this underlying theme that, he needs to be, he's got a platform that he can enable healthier oceans from it. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from the ocean race that we all got, was the power of a sporting platform. And I think then that opportunity to do something that was really big for the media, ending in a United Nations summit, was perfect for Greta. And the fact that she was willing to take on a trip on an IMOCA 60 was awesome.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think she really knew what she was letting herself in for, but
I don't
great.
I don't think I would know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm closer to the sailing world than she was. Wow, that's cool. Sort of switching gears a little bit, just randomly had a question. What is your lowest point? And a better way to word that is, did you ever have a point in your sailing career where you thought, nah, this is too much. I'm not going to do this. Did you ever want to quit?
No. Simple answer, no. Never. I'm not one to give up easily. I'm too tenacious. And I think if you're a solo sailor, you have that level of tenacity that means you don't give up that easily. I mean, if you did, you'd be finishing all over the place. And I think the reason for that being is there's too much investment of blood, sweat and tears and finances and people that, back you and get you to that start line, that you can't possibly, just cave in when it all gets a bit tricky. There's been times where you just think, just really like to get off and sleep in a bed and have a bath, and then I'll come back and finish tomorrow. These are the little fantasies going on in your head, I was amongst the ice going the wrong way round, and I'd never experienced that before. And after 3 days, I was like, I'm just going to get off and hang out with the penguins. It's got to be easier. And I think those kind of emails don't help the people back at home, because obviously they're not living the experience with you, and they're like, whoa, is she okay? But I never wanted to give up, and I'm driven too much to almost prove people wrong sometimes.
Who are you trying to, are you trying to prove yourself wrong or other people? Where does that come from?
I think so. There's always an element of people that doubt what you're doing. So the wrong way round was obviously pretty extreme. Was
that on your own? That wasn't as a part of a race or anything?
No, and I think that's the risk, because when you're out there, there isn't another the rest of the fleet of boats that are your safety net. You're putting yourself out there at risk. And I had some autopilot issues before I even got in the Southern Ocean. And there were a few people doubting whether it was a sensible thing to do. Well, let's face it, sailing the wrong way around the world isn't that sensible anyway. So I was like, well, let's dismiss that and, focus on what we can do. I've got the boat that's built for purpose, and it's only me that has to sort myself out and get around this. So, I was very determined to make that happen. And then other times, the Vendée Globe, I had my mainsail delaminating and disintegrating on me from Australia onwards. It was like confetti coming out the back of the boat every time I did anything with the mainsail. And some people had the same issue because they'd had the same structure design of their mainsail, and they gave up. They stopped along the way, and it was like, well, am I going to give in or am I going to keep going? It's like, well, the boat's still sailing, so let's worry about it when you have to.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, actually, is where do you draw that line? Especially, with racing, you've got so much smaller margins in terms of seamanship, for example. So how do you make those? How do you know when you're getting too close to the edge?
I think you instinctively know when you're there, but everybody has a different level. Everyone has a different limit. And for me, the mainsail was still working. It just wasn't 100%. But actually, it was still driving the boat, and I was still able to make progress. So it's like, well, until you don't have a mainsail, then we'll worry about it then. And I'd come out the Southern Ocean, I was back in the Atlantic, and it was like, well, just sail hard and we'll deal with it when we have to deal with it. And as it was, it got me to the finish line. That was a race where 30 boats started and only 11 of us finished. So I think it would have been very easy to go, oh, look, my mainsail's not working anymore. I've got massive holes in it. I'll just give up. But actually, I was really delighted that I wasn't that easily convinced.
Do you think that actually has an effect, like in a race where there's a lot of attrition? Does that affect people's decision-making, whether they stay in it or not?
I think it depends on the type of person you are, because ultimately you've got to be happy with the environment and the conditions you're sailing in and how you're sailing. And if it is, not something you're dealing with, then it's not worth going on. But I think the whole conversation has to be, what's safety? What's your safety limit? What's your safety factor for this? And we don't want anybody having to abandon a boat, getting to that last moment where any other option's too late and you're abandoning a boat. And we have seen that in recent races. And it's, should they have made the decision earlier? Is it sensible? And there's so many variables for each person that it's a case-by-case basis. You can't kind of draw the line of, if you have sail damage, you need to stop. Because some people will repair it, some people will live without it or work their way around it, and some people won't.
Did you ever come close to your edge, wherever that is? Did you ever have any close ones?
I don't think so. Well, I haven't got there yet. I mean, every race is so different, not only just by direction or boat or something, but what you experience along the way. So, I had catastrophic failure of my mainsail, but it didn't stop me. We've had a loss of life on another boat, which affected everybody in the fleet of the Volvo.
Where was that?
On the Volvo Ocean Race in the Southern Ocean leg, just before Cape Horn.
Sure, okay, yeah.
We had the loss of John Fisher, a British sailor on Scallywag, and it affected everybody. Yeah. And in our minds, it didn't really happen in our world. Yeah. What do you mean someone's died in our playground kind of thing? That shouldn't happen. It affected everyone quite significantly. And then you realise the more you put yourself out there, the more exposed you are, and the risk must go up. You've got 9 lives. Am I using them all up, or am I still okay? But I think illness or injury is a tough one to deal with, because especially if you're on your own, you're your own self-medic. But when you're with a team, it's slightly different dynamic, and you get strength from the people around you, and it's all about getting the right people around you so that you keep that atmosphere good and it keeps moving you forwards as a team.
Do you prefer one style over the other?
I thought I would, and I often think that after I've been in a team event, it's quite nice to go solo again afterwards. But actually, I'm now at the point where I see the benefits of both, and I actually really enjoy both.
It's maybe this is just a misconception, but it seems like there tends to be, Volvo or Ocean Race team sailors and then the solo sailors. Do they often mix?
No, but it's starting to happen a little more now. Now with the opening up of the Ocean Race to take on the IMOCA 60s, it's suddenly of interest to both sides. There are very few of us that have done both and enjoyed both.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, it feels like it's it feels like it's a very different type of person.
It is, and you sail very differently as well. Yeah. And I think it's the intensity of the Ocean Race, because the boats that you're trying to go at 100% all the time. And when you're sleeping, someone else is on deck making it go at 100% all the time. The intensity is very different. But I think now the way the Vendée is being sailed, that intensity is rising. The foils are making it that much more intense, and the sheer speed of it all. So I think they're generally equaling up, but generally you'll have a solo sailor is very methodical, very organised, and very set in how they do stuff, and will have certain ways to do stuff. And Ocean Race sailors are a bit more just make it all happen, and it's a bit all over the place. And you spend all your time clearing up after them.
Do you have any mentors that you've learned from?
Yeah, I've been massively inspired by Peter Blake, as in how to keep going against all the odds. The fact that he managed to galvanise a whole country to support a sailing team is phenomenal, even now if you think about it. And I think New Zealand is very special for that very reason. They really understand and get it. Everyone does, no matter where they live. Yeah. And to have achieved that in so many disciplines of the sport, because we have quite a complex sport, and he did that at great level, and then be such a strong environmentalist at the end. That to me was somebody that really went above and beyond.
Was he on your radar before you got into sailing?
I think I was, I probably wasn't aware of that many sailors, but he was definitely, one of the storytellers that you think, oh wow.
Sort of transcended to popular culture almost.
Yeah. And you think about, I've obviously sailed for Sir Che Blythe and had him support my wrong way round, and do a lot of work alongside Robin Knox-Johnson now. So, these are legends of the sport that actually were groundbreaking in what they did and allowed us to have the events we have now. Yeah. And it is kind of cool to have been that close to those people. So they must have had a knock-on effect, rubbed off on me. Yeah. Completely.
Who taught you how to sail in the first place?
I did it at university a bit. We went offshore off the west coast of Scotland. Beautiful sailing in the Outer Hebrides. I did my dinghy instructors in a lake in Yorkshire. So in the middle of the country, I had to break the ice to do my capsize drills. I remember that, thinking, what is this sport? And then obviously came over to UKSA, where, a whole new world opened up to me. Mike Golding, having had my first job in the industry for him.
What was that job, by the way?
So I was just a nipper on his corporate boat while he was preparing for his Vendée Globe.
Okay.
So he was somebody that had gone from the Global Challenge, sailed solo the wrong way around the world, and then did the Vendée Globe. So if you look at my path, it almost replicates following in his footsteps.
Was that intentional?
Well, his comment to me when I said, I'd quite like to look into that, he said, you're far too emotional. And we laugh about it now because I probably was at the time. But, obviously these are little kind of just nuggets that have had an effect on me and molded me along the way. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching him prepare for his Vendée Globe, and I was diving the bottom of the boat each day and sorting his food out and cleaning things, doing all the non-important jobs, and then just taking the corporate guests out to wave him off and say goodbye. And to see the focus required, and just that single-mindedness to actually make it happen. I then worked for Alex Thompson, so it's quite funny that I've actually kind of been fringes of lots of names that are really well known in the sport, and then I thankfully went and did it myself.
Did you have a sense that was something that you could do back then?
No, I didn't really think I was that single-minded, that tenacious, that focused. In my head, and I think most people who know me socially will, socially bubbly person, and not your normal solo sailor that's generally a bit introverted and a bit kind of, off with the fairies sometimes. But you can adapt and be whatever you have to be, I think. So
what was the trigger then for you? Like what made it switch? When did you decide, okay, that I can do that?
Opportunity. I think Che Blythe was, obviously landed an opportunity in my lap. And I had that whole, well, why shouldn't it be me? And actually, I realised I quite liked it and I was quite good at it. And actually, it's that whole, I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to manage quite a lot of things. And so I think when you're in complete control of everything, it's kind of quite a nice position to be in. But then, you suffer from that as well. So the good bits, when it all goes right, you're brilliant. But when it all goes wrong, there's nowhere to hide because it's your fault as well. So you kind of have this up and down, and that's when you need to have the mental resilience to remain quite level emotionally.
That's a perfect segue because I was going to ask you about SCA where you weren't in charge. So what was that experience like? And
completely different. And it was also different because it was my first move into the Volvo Ocean Race. So that intensity. But I was frustrated. Because I think we had some really skilled people, but not in the right roles. And
you didn't have the authority to make a change.
And I didn't have any problem with not having any responsibility, but it frustrated me to see the skills we had not being used. And therefore it had this underlying current of frustration quite a lot of the time. And, everyone had it for different reasons. And we had some amazingly skilled people, and we're all friends now, which is really nice. But I think, it took us the whole race to kind of sort ourselves out. And so, as always, when you get to the end of the race, you're in the perfect position to start the race and be competitive.
That's right. Exactly.
But we did a phenomenal job, having been 12 years without a female team, kind of putting female sailors back on the map again. And I think that was the instigator to the incentivised rule change and the movement that there's been in the ocean race now for women sailors.
Have you been involved in like the decision-making level to make those changes? What's been your role there? Or have you been a supporter of that? Or what, how's that work?
I was a true advocate for it.
Yeah.
The people in charge at the time, your Richard Masons, who was there as part of SCA, so actually saw our development as a group of girls in this environment. And Mark Turner, having worked with Ellen MacArthur through all her careers, he was always going to be a strong advocate for it as well. And he had the balls almost to put it out there and make it happen. And you can't help but respect that. As much as he had a lot of, pushback against it, he had a lot of people, a lot of negativity, a lot of people saying that, it's just tokenism and stuff. But actually, without it happening, we were never going to make the change happen. And it's going to take a little bit of time before the momentum grows and there's enough people with experience to come and do it themselves. But it happened, and I think it was a great thing.
So Rick and Mia were talking at lunch that none of us are sure what do you have a current project going? Is there another thing in the works? Are you allowed to talk about it?
I wish I could give you a big announcement, but no. As always, it's finding the funding, and our current economic and political climate in the UK is not very good for that.
A little bit uncertain at the moment.
Yes, but it doesn't stop me wanting to be involved. I definitely put it this way: I never want the ocean race to go without me. It's in my blood. I've something in there now, and I'd love to be back there on the start line. But it's a little way off, so you never know. Whether I step on someone else's boat or, manage to find the funds, I don't know. But definitely want that to happen. But also, I genuinely love being out there and I love doing it, that I look for other opportunities. So I've had lots of cool sailing, but the one thing that stuck in my mind was the platform for a message. Sporting platform, the demographic reach it has, the way it can convey a message, and it's so much more convincing. So I did a little bit of homework, and there's an opportunity, I think, now with the climate crisis as it is, that we can sail the Northeast and the Northwest Passage around the North Pole in one season. Yeah. So I'd quite like to do that, following on with all the science research and data that we can collect in that environment as well. And I'd love to make that happen as a bit of a platform. Do you know of a guy called Matt Rutherford? Yes. Have you met Matt? I haven't met Matt. I've heard a lot of his stories. So he's one of our good friends from Annapolis, and he's had that same idea as well, because he started a nonprofit foundation doing ocean science research stuff, and he's wanted to go Northwest Passage in one season, I think, and has had ideas on that too. So that's cool. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think it is exciting. And the thing is, when you're on a boat talking about oceans, it's almost more powerful because you're that much closer to it. Yeah. So I think a lot of people understood the plastic because they interact with plastic every day. Yeah. So they can see it, understand it, and then make a conscientious decision. And I think when we talk about the climate, people don't really understand how that impacts them personally, right, or how their actions each day have an impact, because it's too big a subject. It's too difficult. And seeing a starving polar bear on a bit of ice doesn't help them because they don't interact with polar bears every day. And I think if you can bring it to life, and it's a type of platform that can do something quite exciting. And there's a lot of people going up there. So I think it's really opening up to having a valuable platform. So I hope one of us gets to do it. Have you been up north, up in the high Arctic? We were up in Svalbard last year. You should go. The photos and everything just look amazing, and you see the videos and it looks stunning. And there's more and more people going up there, so I am going to have to go up there regardless. It is spectacular. We're going back in 2021 now too. We decided. Haven't actually announced that yet, but anyway. You have happening now. No, we have now. Yeah. What are you most proud of? I think 3 things stick to my mind that are really easy, and one is the Vendée Globe. If somebody had told me on the start line, oh, you can finish 6th, I would have bit their arm off if that was an opportunity. And there it was, even with the mess of sails, and that finish is phenomenal when you come into the Sable d'Olonne. So yeah, that really sticks in my mind. The other one was Turn the Tide on Plastic rounding Cape Horn. So that was just a few days after the loss of John Fisher. My team had been massively affected, and not many people get to achieve every single time they set off to round Cape Horn. And here I was on number 6 out of 6. And actually it was a massive wave of relief, but I was just watching the crew celebrating, having their photos, smoking the cigars, messages to mums and brothers and girlfriends and sisters. And I was just really proud that I just delivered this lot a Cape Horn rounding. And actually part of me was like, oh, we're out the Southern Ocean, thank God for that as well. But it was much more emotional than I ever thought it would be. And that moment sticks in my mind because they all were like, are you crying? And I was like, no. And then actually the whole project of just seeing a young, inexperienced crew grow in the space of 10 months and finish completely different people to the people I started with in Alicante. In what sense? Confidence, experience, knowledge, and just attitude. And that was from sailing, from competing, from racing, and from, being advocates, speaking of their campaign and their mission. And they genuinely had passion. And, I feel that they all walked away saying that was a really good year of my life.
I would be foolish if I didn't ask a selfish question. I mentioned before we started recording that we're thinking about putting our Swan 59 in this OGR retro Whitbread thing, which also hasn't been announced yet, but I guess we're beyond that now. What I'm about to do something that's way above and beyond my experience if we do this as managing around the world Southern Ocean. I've never sailed in the Southern Ocean. I've never done that. Can you give me any advice?
Oh my God. First of all, enjoy it, love it. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I would say, speak to people like me and ask the questions. There isn't such a thing as a stupid question. Ask all those questions. And the problem is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So actually you just need us to download information at you and then you, with enough time to process it. And I think one of the things that I learned in Cape Town when I was about to leave with my crew who were wide-eyed at the thought of going into the Southern Ocean for the first time was actually they don't know how to live down there. And I was like, it's some of the best sailing you're ever going to do. But yes, it is wet, cold, grey, miserable. And at times it's going to suck. But it is some of the best sailing you're ever going to do. And managing yourself in those places is important. And this is what I suggest, and it's little tips that you pick up from experience that are going to be invaluable to you because you don't know what those are yet. So, I'm more than willing to share that with you.
Be careful what you wish for.
But also, I think don't underestimate, if you're going to lead the team, you're going to take your boat and you're going to lead a group of people, to have a support network so that you're supported, because it's a lonely place at the top. You've got to make the decisions and some of them are not going to be popular decisions. But you want to do it with the best atmosphere and ambience and the happiest team and all the right things for all the right reasons. But some of those decisions are going to be difficult. So have support there and have somebody there mentally with you so that you can make it as easy as possible for yourself.
I think that'll be my biggest takeaway from this interview is it's just one of those sort of weird serendipitous timing things. We've actually been talking about this, that, okay, it's time to stakes are getting higher. Let's find a sports psychologist like this. And now here you are mentioning this. And I see a lot of parallels in the way you described your emotional ups and downs. I'm like that too. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, it is the way it is.
It is, but it's unsustainable under times of stress for that duration. So you need to be able to manage it better. And it's learning about how to manage yourself. So it can only empower you to do more.
It's very encouraging to hear you say that you actually had a distinctive change in yourself from having done that.
No, I'd highly recommend it. And I massively underestimated its impact that it's had on my sailing.
Yeah, think of how it would have been if you would have actually been open to it in the first place.
I know. Who knows where I could have gone?
Cool. Well, what do you do day to day? What is your day to day routine now if you're not managing?
I wish I had an average day. I don't, but I do still invest in myself. So I'm very aware that as time goes on, I'm probably going down the rankings of everyone's pick when they're picking their crew. I'm getting a bit older. So physically, I'm working really hard to make sure I'm still as strong as I was. So at the moment, I spend a lot of time I do 2 sessions a week with a personal trainer and I'm in the gym 3 sessions on my own. And that's religious. And actually, I really enjoy it. I love it. And I'm stronger now than I ever have been. So it's definitely working. I just need to convince everyone else out there that I'm the pick that you want, experience and strength. And I do a lot of speaking. And actually, my remit for speaking has grown since the Turn the Tide. So it's a lot more on leadership, empowerment, diversity and inclusion, and sustainability, as well as the overcoming adversity and resilience that I was talking about before. So I'm doing a lot of speaking, which I really enjoy, be it for after dinner or conferences as well. So I don't really have a regular daily routine, but while I'm home, my dog's very happy. So he gets very long dog walks when I'm home.
You can be like you sailed with Magnus Olsen with Team SCA. I mean, he was the guy they kept going to back because he was there. He'd done it. I mean, you've certainly got the experience now. So
yeah, definitely. And you get asked
Magnus
to
Olsen.
do different things, which is good. Asked to give advice for whatever it's worth. But, when people ask, you think, oh, yeah, I do carry a certain amount of experience with me now. And through different disciplines, so not just in one sphere. But it's still quite good to kind of test yourself, like the recent solo race around Lake Geneva. It's kind of good to put yourself out your comfort zone and remind yourself that you can still do it.
Do you still have a desire to do like another nonstop around the world? Is the energy still there?
Definitely the energy is still there. And after something like that, event in Geneva, I was thinking, oh, maybe I could. It was fun, and it was nice to keep that fire alight, because that, you know, it's that desire, that passion, the genuine love of what I do is what keeps me going out there.
Well, if we do OGR in 2023, you can come with us.
Cool. I'll be your mentor. I'll be the one at the side.
You can be my sports psychologist. That's perfect. I promised I'd ask you 2 questions to wrap up the interview. The first is, what do you want to recommend? And the second is, who do you think I should interview next on the podcast?
So I think what would I want to recommend is that convince everyone that everyone can make a change and have an impact. You know, if we're going to make a difference to our environment, we need to keep thinking that way. And as a consumer, you're really powerful. So don't underestimate your conscientious decisions that you can make now. And who do I think you should interview next? Well, you've interviewed so many. The list is running out. But I think I like new young blood, giving them the opportunity to say what they're about and what they want to do. So one person I've got an eye on is Nikki Henderson, who finished second in the last Clipper race behind Wendy Tuck.
Okay.
She was the youngest skipper to ever do it. She took that crown off Alex Thompson. And I think she's got aspirations to do some big things in the future. So you might get her just before she does something big.
Cool. Yeah, would love if you could help get me in touch. Cool. Thanks a lot, Dee. This has been awesome.
No, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
All right. Another one down. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks to Weems and Plath for their continued support of the podcast. On the Wind is also supported by offshore passage opportunities. If you can't find time to sail with us, head over to sailopo.com and sign up for our good friend and former podcast guest, Hank Schmidt's awesome crew networking service that's been going strong since 1993. Basically, OPO is a membership site that offers crew looking to get offshore the chance to do just that. You pay an annual dues fee, and Hank gives you access to deliveries. If you're a boat owner looking for crew, the service is free. So check out sailopo.com for more info and to sign up. And by Barnacle Systems. Brandon and I first met a few boat shows ago, and I actually interviewed him on the podcast too. We share the entrepreneurial spirit. After a career making high-tech security systems for government and military applications, Brandon decided to follow his true passion and make systems for boats instead. We've got a Barnacle on both Eastbjorn and Ice Bear, allowing us to remotely see what's going on with the critical systems on board. A sleek app on my smartphone lets me see battery voltages, bilge pump information, whether the boat's been impacted by anything, what the temperature and humidity is on board. There's even a built-in camera that lets me see what's going on inside. It's a huge relief to my inherent captain's anxiety when I'm away from the boat, and honestly, I'm not sure how we got along without this before. Get one for yourself at barnacle.io. That's BRNKL.io.
On the Wind is produced by 59 Degrees North and hosted by Andy Schell. August Sandberg helps with the filmed version of the show, and both he and Lee Cumberland help produce the audio show when Andy and I are at sea. Sophie Darcy of Ryan and Sophie Sailing on YouTube has been a big help in setting up our YouTube channel for the filmed version of the show. The show notes have become a group effort and are written mostly by Ben Sufer, previously by Liz Karamavros, and sometimes by me, Mia Carlson. Cameron Dale composed and performs the intro music to the show, and Stormweather Shanty Choir are behind the outro music. Make sure to listen to episode number 252 with Håkon Vatle to hear about the history of the band and sea shanties in general. Subscribe to On the Wind on iTunes, Google Podcast, and your favorite Codcast app. You can help us out and support the show by simply leaving a review on iTunes, or better yet, telling your friends. You can also donate cash money. Cash money, homie? Right? You can also donate cash money via patreon.com/onthewind or directly to us. Just click the big blue fund button at onthewind.co. Finally, a huge thanks to all of you who listen. Email your comments and interview suggestions, or just say hello to holdfast@59-north.com. We read and reply to every email. Don't you worry. Until next time, hold fast.
We'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you took up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea.